Okay. Good morning and welcome. Thank you for joining us for this Monday session. Today, we are really excited to have Lydia McNeiley joining us. Lydia is a rock star in the counseling world in our state, and so we're just really glad that she can share on this topic with us today. Lydia is going to be talking about equity-focused college and career counseling. And I did link in the slides, but if you joined us after I did that, you may not be able to see those. So I will link those again here in just a few minutes. But with that, I am going to let Lydia share a little bit more about herself and then get us going. Thanks, Lydia.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Tamara, and thanks for to Keep Indiana Learning and Counselor Connect for inviting me to do this presentation. I'm really excited to be with everybody today. My name is Lydia McNeiley. I currently serve as a lead professional learning specialist, for Hatching Results, which is a school counselor. We work with school counselors to help them develop comprehensive school counseling programs that are data-driven. I'm a licensed professional school counselor. I'm a licensed K-12 administrator, but school counseling has my heart. So I definitely wanted to pursue work in school counseling as opposed to work as a building administrator. I am the Indiana 2024 School Counselor of the Year, and I currently serve on your ISCA Board of Directors as the co-assistant chair of the board. I have done work for ASCA as well. So I currently serve on the ASCA DEI committee. Equity work is a passion point of mine. So certainly I'm grateful to be able to serve on the ASCA DEI committee. And I have also served as a lead ramp reviewer over the past several years for the American School Counselor Association. I'm excited for you all to join me. I guess I want to start off like why this is the passion point of mine when you're talking about like equity focus college and career counseling. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I grew up in a very underserved community. I was a teen parent, first gen, lack of resources. My husband and my daughter, when we were still in our 20s, and she was I think probably 8 or 9 at that point. But we grew up together. And I definitely wanted to become the school counselor that I wish I had years ago, just to kind of help give me the direction and help me with all the tools of kind of figuring out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So I always, whatever I've been able to do, whatever I do, I kind of take it back to that and remembering who I was back then and trying to use that to guide the work that I do now. So again, it's important as school counselors that we kind of remember like why we're doing this and kind of take it back to that when things get rough, which we know that they do. And so today we wanted to talk about the objectives or the objectives today. Hopefully by the end of this presentation, we'll be able to talk about high school student demographics in Indiana. Not only that, but we're going to go into Indiana and across the nation as well, explain barriers to access and inclusion, which impact academic, social, emotional, and college and career development for BIPOC students, and then identify best practice for working with students to mitigate barriers across access and inclusion. And so also besides thinking about your why, I think it's important to look at our ASCA position statements and think about like what our roles as school counselors. Position statements, I have them hyperlinked on where it says ASCA position statements. So I always would go back to ASCA position statements whenever I would do any work, especially when I was talking to my principal about the work of school counselors. I would always just go back to those position statements because they have so many different examples that you can use. But when it comes to ASCA specifically talks about college access professionals, how we are college access professionals, and we have a critical role in preparing students for lifelong learning and success. So always going back to that. And then equity for all students. The school counselors acknowledge and value individual and group differences that exist among students. School counselors are advocates for the equitable treatment of all students and strive to establish inclusive and welcoming learning environments in which all students can thrive and we reach their full potential. So again, I just wanted to kind of focus on that this morning as we start talking about this work. And so we'll start off talking about student demographics. And so the information that I have, next slide, is actually going to be, this is actually from, and the links, when you look at the slide deck, the links are all on there as well. So this is from the Commission for Higher Ed. We all know that over the last several years, the college going rate for Indiana had started to go down. So it was at 53%, but it's kind of held steady at that 53% over the last several years. But when you're breaking it down, one of the things that I would always do as school counselor is kind of like break things down by demo. So just because that's 53%, like what does that look like when you were talking about my students? So, and I hate that it's blurry, but it does say like for female and male. So we have a breakdown where Asian, Black, Hispanic, small population, white. So when you're looking at Black, you're at 40% male, 50% female, Hispanic 50% female, 38% male, white 62%, 48% male, and then small populations 53% and 43% male. I've always worked in an urban setting, but I definitely understand there are certain places in the state that are very rural, and that they have their own unique uh, concerns that are not necessarily reflected in the work that we're doing across the state, unfortunately. So I definitely, when you're looking at the number, when you're looking at the small population, we have to be cognizant of that. When the overall rate is 53%, and for the small population, it's 43% for males, and there's a gap there, right? For Hispanic males, 38%, Black males, 40%. There's gaps, right? So I think as school counselors, we're looking at those gaps, looking and reflecting upon our own population and figuring out how we can go ahead and address those gaps. And this is just the overall, and this again from Commission for Higher Ed, you can pull that data. I just like visuals. So again, 53% of that college going rate right now, but then this also breaks down by CTE concentration and 21st century scholars. And I think it's important to look at how successful 21st century scholars are, because these are students who are going to be free and reduced lunch, but they're very successful in going on to higher ed. And if we can go to the next slide, you're looking at like, if I look at a deeper dive where students, you're not looking at 21st century scholars, right? You're looking at free and reduced lunch is a 38% college going rate, or 39%, right? But non-free and reduced lunch is 60%. So there are certainly gaps there, right? But it seems like 21st century scholars, when students have the support of 21st century scholars, because they have that support in at higher ed, that might help them become more successful in addressing those gaps. But again, when you're breaking down race and ethnicity, overall, this is male and female, 54.9% for white, 45% for Black, 43.8% for Hispanic, and 76.2% for Asian. So again, thinking about your own student population, how you can help address those gaps is important when you're thinking about this work. And so nationally, and so it's important for us just not only to think about like what we're doing in the state of Indiana, but also nationally, when you're looking at public school students, almost half of the students across the country are going to be BIPOC students. So public school students across the country, 22.1 million are white, 14.4 million are Hispanic, 7.4 million are Black, 2.7 million are Asian. So it goes down, but again, more than half the students across the country are BIPOC students, and I believe 72, is it 72%? That could change, but about 72% of our profession is going to be white females. So if that's the case, then what are we doing to be intentional about the work that we're doing when half of our students are going to be BIPOC students? So again, intentionality might be a word that I'm going to use often in this presentation, just because I think that the work that we're doing, it's important for us to learn the populations that we serve, and be intentional about the work that we're doing in order to help address these gaps. So school counselors must be equipped to address the needs of a diverse population, is really what we're talking about today. So I think about college and career readiness. And if you go through the slides, a lot of the slides are going to have content about college, more so over career. And I think that just because of the numbers for the college going rate, I think we have to be intentional about giving students the opportunity to know whether they wanted to go on to college or whether they wanted a career, but whatever path they choose, we want to make sure as school counselors that we give them the tools necessary for them to be prepared for whatever post-secondary option they choose to pursue. But when you're thinking about college and career readiness, a student is college and career ready when he or she has attained the knowledge, skills, and disposition needed to succeed in credit-bearing post-secondary coursework or a workforce training program. I do have a link for the new Indiana diploma. I know it's not finalized, but I know it's still going through the process. When we're thinking about higher education, we're thinking about workforce ready training. It's important, especially as these diplomas, especially as with these new changes that are going on with the diploma, with changes that might go on in the future. It's important for us to get our students ready early on because once they get into high school, if we haven't given them opportunities in elementary or middle school, then we're closing the doors on them, right? And so in the next couple of slides, we're going to talk about AP and what AP looks like. But it's important for us to really give students opportunities for engagement early on. Oh, barriers. I just like that picture. And so this is from the US Department of Education. I did link the slide or that where I got that from. But from the US Department of Education, America's Black and Latino students are at a disadvantage in nearly every measure of educational opportunity with less access to advanced classes, counselors, and even certified teachers, according to data released by the US Department of Education. The findings reflect inequities that have lasting implications for students' ability to learn effectively, go on to college, and earn degrees. And so I'm just going to give, and again, all the links are on this slide, but I'm going to give a little data snapshot for college and career readiness across the country. Latino students represent 27% of high school students and made up 20% of AP Science and 19% of AP Math. When we're thinking about AP classes, students who take AP classes are typically more successful when they go on to college, and that in the links stating that are on there as well. But research has shown that low-income students and students of color are less likely to take advanced math and science classes, even in schools where AP courses are offered. Black and Latino students represent 38% of students in grades 7th or 8th. They represent 32% of students taking algebra in those grades and 29% of students passing algebra. A quarter of high school students with the highest percentage of Black and Latino students do not offer Algebra 2, and a third of those schools do not offer chemistry. And Black and Latino students also have less access to gifted and talented education programs than white students. So there is a growing opportunity gap for gifted and talented education programs. So the reason that this data is so important to look at as school counselors is that we are enrolling students in AP and advanced dual credit courses. And again, when students are in AP dual credit courses, they're more successful when they go on to college. So when you have AP courses, when you have dual credit courses, it's important for you to take a look at and you can pull up your demographics and you could pull up how they break down by race, how they break down by gender. It's important for us to be mindful of who's in those classes and who isn't. And also what we can do to intentionally talk to our teachers, talk to our administration about making sure that we're enrolling students that match our population. If a district is 50% Black and Brown, yet only 10% of their Black and Brown students are in AP courses, and that's a problem, right? So what can we do as school counselors to intentionally ensure that we have, and AP, you can start students in honors classes and dual credit courses early on. So it's not even before they get to the AP courses, but even in middle school, who is in your honors courses, because a lot of those students who are in those honors courses are going to end up taking those AP courses later on. So who is in your honors courses in elementary? I've had several teachers that I've talked to, and I'll talk about English language learners later on in the presentation, but with the English language learners are learning to speak English, right? And they have to get a certain score in order to pass out of certain English classes, right? It does not mean that they can't be successful, and if they have an A in math, they can't be placed in an AP course for math. or they can't be placed in honors class for math. So I remember having very detailed conversations or difficult conversations with certain teachers and certain administrators because there were certain students who deserved to be in these certain classes. But again, they weren't the first students that were thought of to be placed in those classes. So as school counselors, we can take that extra step to like really look at that breakdown and make sure that our dual credit, our honors, our AP classes reflect our student population. So the STEM highlight, I certainly wanted to highlight the STEM because I do have a really great picture that's coming up in a couple of slides with the STEM. But 2 and 5, Black and Latino students say STEM courses are their favorite and when they aspire to go to college. But yet only 3% are enrolled in AP STEM. Like that's staggering. Um, Only 3% of Black and Latino students are enrolled in AP STEM courses. Yet 2 and 5 are saying they're interested in it. So again, what can we do as school counselors to ensure that we're enrolling students in these courses? Growing opportunity gap in gifted and talented education. Black and Latino students represent 26% of students enrolled in gifted and talented education compared to Black and Latino students, 40% enrollment in schools offering those courses. So again, 26% are enrolled when they're compared to 40% enrollment in schools offering those courses. So the data shows that Black and Latino students are successful in advanced courses when given the opportunity, but again, they have to be given the opportunity. So this is the graphic I was talking about. I like the graphic. I've used it before because I think it's really important to kind of take a look at that from a school counselor standpoint. Less than 3% again are enrolled in those classes. Schools are not enrolling Black and Latino students and students from low income backgrounds in advanced courses that prepare them for science, technology, engineering, and math. And so again, think about that. If we're not enrolling them in these classes, and this is Black and Latino students and students from low income backgrounds in general, again, we're talking about like those remote areas across our state. If we're not enrolling them in these classes, then how do we want them to be successful? And how do we want them to achieve positions and jobs in those fields if we're not enrolling them in the classes in high school? Again, this is not just an issue that should affect or bring pause to school counselors. This is something that teachers should be looking at. This is data that administrators have to look at. This is something the state in general has to look at when we're thinking about opportunities for students moving forward. And I think the numbers for ELL is even more staggering. So enrollment of EL students in advanced courses, it's only 3%. That's again, that's sad because you're talking about ELL students. There are concerns when it comes to like working with them individually and as a group for English, right? And so sometimes they might need assistance in these classes with directions, but again, math is math, whatever your language is, biology, calculus, so again, these numbers when it comes to ELL, 3% across dual language, gifted and talented, especially dual credit programs because dual credit programs they could start taking in school. Some ELL students, if they happen to be newcomers and don't qualify for federal aid, dual credit courses that they can take in high school, they can take for free. Um, for the most part, and I know some schools might charge $25 or $50 per credit, but they can take them at a reduced rate and earn credit for college where they wouldn't qualify for federal funding for college. So it's important that when there are opportunities like that and you have a dual credit program with Ivy Tech, which I know a lot of our schools have Ivy Tech Urban Sense as their partner across the state. So when you're looking at that, talk to Ivy Tech because students who are newcomers who might not qualify for federal aid can qualify for these dual credit courses in high school, again, for free or reduced rates. So we don't always know student-specific needs. It's our responsibility to educate ourselves on how to best serve them. And working with diverse populations, we must be cognizant of the inequities they may be facing and work to address them to better serve our students. I think it's important as school counselors, we have to be aware of the communities that we're serving and the needs that they have, and then how we can go ahead and best serve them. And so again, I'm always taking things back to the school counselor role. School counselors, we have the power to be change agents. So one of the goals of school counselors connect students with information, social capital, opportunities, and resources. But in order to do that, we have to know the barriers that students might be facing. And so in certain districts, there may not be rigorous coursework. In certain students, there might not be licensed teachers teaching courses, right? Um, So what can we do within our framework of our school counseling program to promote equity and access to all students? So sometimes it's mitigating things that are above, sometimes above our pay grade, right? But circumstances are above our pay grade. But unfortunately, when we're doing the work for students, we're supposed to be doing the intentional work for all of our students. So again, it really does have to, it comes back to our roles and responsibilities or ethics as school counselors, but also just doing what's best for servicing all of our students and our families. So when we're thinking about, and again, going back to the Ask the National model, so the Ask the National model does say that that school counselors should spend 80% of their time. I know that's not a reality in a lot of our schools. I'm not saying that it is, but in an ideal world, the Ask the National model does recommend that school counselors spend 80% of their time in direct and indirect service with students. So when you're thinking about your program, you're going to want to think about intervening within that framework to promote equity and access for all students. So when you're thinking about that 80% of time, direct service is that instruction, appraisal and advisement, or counseling, individual counseling or group counseling. Indirect is that consultation, collaboration, and referrals. And I think that when you're working with populations that might have more need, that consultation, that collaboration, that referral piece it has to be an integral part of your total program. Doesn't mean that it has to be all your program, but it has to be a huge part of what you're building because your students are going to need more resources than just meeting with you individually one-on-one. They're going to need these outside resources, and those outside resources could actually help you in building the program. Um, it's not trying to add more to your plate, but just kind of finding out. And sometimes it's just finding out the resources that are available to you in your area and bringing in those resources so that way they can help you support your students. So I'm going to talk right now about empowering caregivers. It's important um, that you're being intentional about how your families and students take in information. So in elementary school, like, do they need constant reminders? Is there one type of communication that works better than others? Ensure that your families are receiving electronic communication by using apps that track if they're opening it up. But sometimes I know when we would try to call parents, sometimes we were calling during the times when they weren't at home. So we would have to like set reminders or send messages out at times when they were available, right? Being intentional about caregiver and student workshops. Um, I could remember being in Hammond and we were working on a master schedule, and I could remember families coming in and out, and there was like a meeting room. And I could remember just saying, like, wow, like they're coming in and they have the kids and like there's a whole group. And we're always talking about like uh, bringing in family engagement. And I remember like counselors are over here working on schedules, and I'm like, I want to know what's going on over there because all these families are just coming in and out, in and out. And I opened up the room and it was our language development program, which I'll speak about a little bit later. But the room was so welcoming. The people who were there were speaking in English and Spanish. Um, the families were okay to bring their children with them. There were snacks at the table for children. It was a welcoming space. It was a welcoming space that parents who were walking there, if they lived close by, they were driving, if they lived further away, but they were there and they felt like they were a part of the conversation that was going on in that building. And they felt welcomed and they felt included in that building. They were bringing their little children in just to be a part of this. So I saw that and I was like, we have to like replicate that, or we have to figure out like what that secret sauce is because that's working, right? Well, some of the stuff that we were doing wasn't necessarily working. That was working. So what can we do when we're thinking about our workshops and our meetings? What can we do to for that, right? But they felt welcome, right? And I think that's one of the things that when we're setting up these meetings, do families feel welcome? Do families who might come in with small children, families who it says morning or afternoon sessions, like are those available for your families? You don't want just sessions where families can't attend, right? Mode of delivery. Sometimes you're going to have to do virtual meetings, right? Sometimes you might have to do phone calls. But workshops where you're working with families and not talking to families. Um, I could remember us doing like a 21st century like information, and I could remember seeing the looks on families' faces and they were lost, right? Because we were talking to them and they were going through the application, and this is before the auto enrollment, but still we were part of the grant for the auto enrollment, the food grant. So we had to, we still had to help families work through the applications. But I can remember families being lost and not feeling they weren't engaged. So I think that as we move forward when it came to meetings, getting some of that secret sauce from our LDP department and really just making it more of working with families. I filled out FAFSA forms a million times for myself and for my daughter, right? But as a family working and trying to complete a FAFSA for the first time, if you are just um, going over what the different prompts are and our families have a lot of different needs, then we're not being intentional about trying to help our families, right? So it's just trying to figure out what the need is for our families and do our best to make sure that we're able to support them, and share data for your program. So when you are doing really great work as school counselors, it's important for us to talk to our families about what school counselors do, so that way they know more about what school counselors do or the role that you're doing in the school and in the community. Than just when it's time to, apply for scholarships or when it's time to meet over FAFSA. So just definitely want to share your programming with, there are a lot of different apps that if you do have a Spanish speaking population, they can translate things to Spanish. Or again, I worked really well with the language development department in Hammond to help support us in this work. So by empowering caregivers, you support students, you provide social capital to them. Um, you invite parents and caregivers to be part of projects with you. So when you're working with a specific population, it's important to get their input about what would be beneficial for that population. And again, not just it's that whole like working with instead of speaking to, right? So I think that if we're being intentional about just bringing people along, then that goes a long way. Um, Use community to help site and district in non-traditional ways. When you attend conferences, ask for specific resources that you can help to support families, especially I know recently with FAFSA and students who are undocumented, there were a lot of higher education institutions that we had to work with just for resources, just to send them out to us. I know in Indiana, Indiana Latino Institute had a Commission for Higher Ed also had, and I think they worked together, Commission for Higher Ed and Indiana Latino Institute were able to do a lot of sessions across the state, and they did like a lot of FAFSA, um, Facebook Lives. So just resources like that, you want to make sure that you get those out to your families to ensure that they're aware of um, opportunities to assist them. Um, but non-traditional ways, you want to make sure that you're aware of the population that you're serving. If there is and you want to make sure that you're communicating to best address the needs of that community. So if it's a community that there are a lot of church info, like a lot of the churches are really prominent in the community, and a lot that's a way to get information out. Then we had a church that was across the street from us, and they did a lot of they had like meals, like almost like a Meals on Wheels program and things like that. So they had a lot of outreach to the community. So we started working with them just so that way they could help get information out to the community. So figuring out like who actually does work in the community is really an integral part, and they could help you build your program. And so caregiver engagement, make sure caregivers have a voice and a true input and they're equitable decision makers. That when I saw that language development program in the meetings that they were having with families, those families felt they had an input in what was going on in that program, right? So they were having meetings, but they felt their voice was heard. They felt empowered. So that's what you want to work towards. You want to make sure that families feel empowered and are part of that conversation. Again, use technology, Zoom for meetings, apps. Erica's Lighthouse is just something Dr. Marita Cha does a lot of work, and I've worked with her, and she's part of the California School Counselor Association Board of Directors. She does a lot of work with Erica's Lighthouse. They have a lot of information in English and Spanish, a lot of free resources. They're a really great just tool when you're talking about caregiver friendly just options. So definitely want to click on that link and see what opportunities might assist you that they have available. Free resources. They're all free. Also, don't make the assumption as to why caregivers do not come to school events. As I spoke earlier about my why, like I was not a traditional student. I went to college when my daughter was going to college. I worked for a telecommunications company for 14 years, taking classes part-time. And so I was never able, it was very difficult for me to attend meetings, right? Because meetings were at the time when I was working. When the school would call me, I worked in a call center, so I had to like scoot down and use the phone because I couldn't use the phone, right? I would get in trouble if I used the phone, but my daughter's school was calling, I wanted to answer it. Um, I I do not, we've all been in rooms where we've heard people say these parents don't care, right? And that's very difficult for me to hear as a school counselor when I'm hearing these parents don't care. It's not that parents don't care, it's just that sometimes our way of communicating to people it might not be the best way that they can receive that information. So we really have to well, the next bullet point is respect families' knowledge and their communication style, right? I mean, not everybody's going to say, hey, I couldn't answer the phone because I'm going to get written up or suspended. But that was my reality, right? As one parent, that was my reality. And I worked for a really large telecommunications company at the time, but I could not answer a phone. I would get written up and I can get suspended for that. So don't make the assumption that because a parent doesn't answer that they don't care about their student. Tell your story and connect. It took a very long time for me to be able to, and there's a lot of part to my story that I didn't include because I would have taken the whole, my whole hour. But tell your story and connect. There's a lot of different, we might have all be first generation. We might have a lot of things going on at home. We might have, just different parts of our story that might connect to different things that are going on with our families. So it's important for us to be able to connect with families, find something that we could have a conversation about because it's all about engagement. It's about building relationships, just like you want to build relationships with your students. And you could tell when you have that relationship with your student, right? You could see how that grows, that relationship grows and blossoms. When you're building that relationship with families, then you're going to be that go-to when they're having concerns at home, because you're going to be that resource. You're going to be the person that's going to be able to help them get through that, right? But also when it comes to college and career readiness and moving forward, as their student pursues post-secondary opportunities, you're also going to be the person that's going to say, oh, okay, you know what? She talked to me about that before. Like she talked to me about IU. Maybe, IU would be a great idea. Let's call her again and have a conversation about, maybe they can give me the right resources about IU or, whatever it might be. But again, just building that relationship early on. Intentional cultural representation and collaboration, respect family cult structures. A lot of times, especially with Spanish speaking, I know if you don't have anybody that's Spanish speaking in the building, sometimes you might have a student translate, but it's more important to have somebody actually because that also with the family dynamic. It's important to have an adult because students are not always going to give the correct information all the time. Flexible scheduling, sometimes it's important for us to be cognizant that families are working. So maybe there might be a opportunity where administrators are able to flex days, if you have to take calls later on. Childcare, transportation, food, again, not necessarily just school counselor work, but that's just best practice for your building when they're trying to gain opportunities for family engagement, just being able to have somebody, you know, a little fun area, or we would always have like coloring. We didn't have childcare, but we always had like crayons and just like a little play area for students, so that way they can go. And sometimes I would like ask like the PTSA for like little gifts, and they would like, you know, give us crayons and markers and things like that, just so that we could have like little gifts and little things for the students, the littles to play with, right? Sometimes it's important um, for transportation, for food, just being aware of that when you're thinking about family engagement. Some people can PTSA can give snacks and things like that. Be intentional about how families and students take in information. And actually, I do apologize, but I probably wrote that twice, so we can skip that. And so college and career going culture, begin exposure opportunities early. Um, if students can see it, they can be it. And so high school is too late. I know we've worked before in the district I was in before. We would invite student athletes. So a lot of high schools, I mean, I'm sorry, a lot of colleges have honors programs. Honors programs need to fulfill certain hours, right? So they have to fulfill certain volunteer hours. So when I was in a middle school, there was disproportionality for African American male students um, when it came to attendance, right? So we partnered with, in this case, was Purdue Northwest, um, and the Purdue Northwest athletes actually would come and read to students. And so I talked to their athletic director, and she was phenomenal. And then we ended up, when I became, you know, district administrator, they helped us create this program across the district where they were doing intentional like readings. Students were yeah, it ended up becoming when we were talking about reading and the science of reading and things like that. They were coming in and working with students and just reading to students. And it's important for students, number one, to see college athletes, right? Because they're seeing people who look like them coming in, being, you know, spending time back in the community, giving time and reading to students. And we actually had some of them even read in Spanish. So it was a really great opportunity. Just, but again, inviting that higher ed partner that you might have that works close to you, just to come in and support. And this case was honors athletes, but we work with their honors college for tutoring. So they would come and tutor our middle school students. Um, so we partnered with McDonald's to give them a space, and then we partnered with Purdue Northwest, their honors college. And so they were able to come and work with some of our students who signed up for tutoring, because we needed, our students needed tutoring. So we reached out and just kind of thinking outside of the box of how we can kind of um, build that community engagement for the local school, local college, and then also just letting our students see, you know, these college students from the same area just coming back and giving back. So it's just a really great opportunity for everybody, but just something that we really wouldn't have thought of before. So reach out to your local colleges and universities. College students love volunteering for elementary and middle school events. Like they love that. They love seeing little kids and just being like, you know, the little kids love them. So they could participate. They participated in family reading nights. They participate in our open houses. They could support school counselors by helping provide classroom lessons. So they can talk, when you're talking about like what majors they might, you know, be pursuing and what their, you know, what their careers would look like. They can come in and speak to your students. So it's again a good opportunity. I would suggest to talk to the different organizations within, but I know like the honors college for sure is going to be one that they do have certain requirements for hours, for volunteer hours, and so do athletes. So it's a really great place to start. Also see if they can speak a different language, so that way they can participate in caregivers speak events. And some colleges have Title III funds, which allows them to reach out to local schools. I know Purdue Northwest and Ivy Tech had funds where they were able to reach out to our district. And then check if universities have an early outreach program that that your school can participate in. A lot of times, a lot of these colleges have funding. They just don't know who the person is. And again, I was able to do some of this work at the building level. I was able to do some of this work at the district level. They look different, but I was able to start a lot of that in the building. And then we were able to kind of like expand it for the district, but we were able to do some of these in small chunks in the building. So it's certainly something you can work with your building principal to talk out and certainly bring into the building. And then sometimes, your principal could help oversee it. And it's not anything that's going to be additional, a lot of work for you, but just you could help kind of guide that work too. So start early. Again, I think that if when we're looking at those gaps earlier and looking at the students who are not in those AP courses and you want them to be in those courses, um, you're going to want to start giving students opportunities early. So Purdue Northwest, again, is close to us, but I know that there are a lot of different Purdue campuses across the state. K-14 initiatives with Ivy Tech. We work intentionally with them about giving our students opportunities to visit campus. And I know a lot of what I've been speaking of has been more college, but like a lot of our students who are interested in automotive industry, who are interested in I think that they have like a really good like medical assistant program at Ivy Tech. So students who are interested in things like that, then we would give them interest inventory assessments first, find out what they were interested in, and K-12 initiative through Ivy Tech is across the state. So they do work intentionally with the schools that connect to them. So talk to them about possible opportunities for your students to visit. So I remember having like our sixth grade students going to visit the Ivy Tech and like having them with the mannequins and doing the CPR compressions and just things that you're doing those interest inventory assessments already with them. So just being intentional with, okay, you did this interest inventory assessment, you're interested in the career field, in, in the healthcare field, and we can have this, and they would do like small groups with us of 14 or 15 students, and they would talk to like their admissions person, they would do a tour, then they would talk and they would do like in like these activities with them, and they would have like a really great lunch and just kind of just again making them feel welcome on that site, right? Early. But we would always start with those interest inventory assessments just so that way we would have an idea of what the students were interested in before we just random. And if you have the funding and you can send them random, that's fine. But I know when funding is an issue, then it's important to do like the interest inventory. So we send them to places that they might be interested in already. And then partnering district-wide we did a sixth grade career fair. And so that was just partnering with just different, not just higher ed, but just like different we wanted to give students the opportunity so that way they could see what like career, like what a lawyer, what the law firm was doing with the police, what just different, but just bringing all of them to one space so that way your students can see that early and get an idea of what that future could look like for them. Again, the student athletes, fraternities, sororities as well. They have a lot of volunteer hours that they have to complete. I speak a little bit later, but just there are traditional Hispanic fraternities, sororities. There are traditionally African American fraternities and sororities that we've been able to reach out with and do intentional work with. So, and they also have volunteer hours that they have to complete. So certainly reach out to your local universities to see who might be interested in working and partnering with your school. Again, giving students the opportunity to see what they could be in the future. They could act as mentors, they could do read alouds, a lot of different things. Maybe even partner with you when you're going on a field trip. It's cool for, for fifth grade students to have like a college, member of fraternity with their fraternity jacket and just everything. It just makes a really good experience for the student. And we get families involved. Again, that's actually a picture of one of those language development programs because what we did was, hey, we partnered with our language development program to bring in, we work really well with Purdue Northwest, and they would come in and talk to our families about 21st century scholars or FAFSA completion and just what college applications would look like. So we brought them in to talk with our language development program with their families that were at these meetings, and that was really successful. So you're going to want to invite college reps to speak, and I would suggest that make sure that that they're able to speak the language your families are speaking. Like I said, school counselors don't have to do this work alone. Work with your ELL department, work with other departments, work with your PTA department. And then decision day, when you're looking at decision days, you want them to be inclusive of all decisions. So whether a student was, you're celebrating decision day, you want to make sure that it's inclusive of all decisions. If they're deciding to go and earn a certificate in welding, you want to make sure that you're celebrating that. If they're going to Ivy Tech, they're still going to Ivy Tech, they're going to get that stuff, they're going to get that certificate, they're going to make more money than you would as school counselors and welders, right? So we want to celebrate that as a win. We want students to feel validated no matter what decision that they make. But we want to make sure that we give them the tools early on, so that way that the decision that they make is the right one for them, right? Not one that they were forced to have because they didn't have the options available to them. And so the need for additional supports, and I'm looking at my time, so I'm going to go through this kind of quick. Um, so again, identify services on college and university. College and universities are your friend. Like I can't even understand. Like that was, they want a way to work with K-12. There's a huge disconnect. We all know there's a huge disconnect between K-12 and higher ed, but we can work together. TRIO programs, upward bound programs, reach out to your college and universities. Like I said, the honors colleges, they can help bring students in that automatically are going to be like from your area. They might be from other areas. Like a student might want to hear from somebody from a different, a different state. But again, just make sure that you're working with them. Um, the students transition from K-12, it's important that we were even going back to like when we talked earlier about 21st century scholars, like the number, they're very successful, right? Traditionally, they're very successful in college. Why? Because they have those wraparound services, right? And so it's important for us when we're handing off our students that they know who their go-to might be in school. So maybe having a list of like who the TRIO professionals would be at the local schools, what the student organizations are. So that way, when you're handing over, the student that you've worked with for so many years over to this higher ed partner, that you know that your student is fully equipped to be successful, because a lot of our students are going to be first generation students. So you want to make sure that they have the tools and the resources in place to help them be successful when they go on to higher ed. And assisting students with finding mentors. If you have a lot of our local universities might have mentors that could be professors, or you're looking at Latina fraternities, sororities, Pan-Hellenic, the Divine Nine fraternities and sororities, they can be mentors for your students. So again, kind of helping create those connections for students is really an integral part. A financial aid, hopefully it'll be better this year. Hopefully that's the dream, but I'm not sure how that's going to go. But I think that as we were kind of going into financial aid season, we knew that there were a lot of concerns. I know Indiana has done a really great job about having, higher ed partners that are coming out and helping counselors do this work. But you want to start outreach early with families, and again, work with community organizations, higher ed institutions, churches. We might not have to hold an outreach or workshop in a church, but maybe that might be something that the higher ed partner can do at the church, and that we can just let our students know that's available there, right? Because that might be a comfortable place for students and families to work together. But the first time that you're talking to families about financial aid, the earlier is going to be the better, because if you're talking to them about a workshop when it's already financial aid season, that might be too late. You definitely want to start talking to students. When we worked with Purdue Northwestern and Ivy Tech, when our sixth graders would go, they would start talking to them about financial aid. They would just start saying, this is what a GPA is, this is what financial aid is, this is a FAFSA, this is what you're going to have to complete, because you're going to want to start that language early with students, so that way they're aware of what that's going to look like and what they have to look forward to, since they have the FAFSA to look forward to. Again, partner with PTA, partner with your language development program. I know I was on the MTSS team, your building leadership team, just random ideas that you have, because your principal probably has these same concerns. They might not have as many as the FAFSA concerns, but when it comes to like looking at the gaps. So when it comes to like looking at the students who are going on and are taking these AP courses and those that are not, when people start breaking down that data, you want to make sure that you're, hey, you know what, I'm the school counselor, and this is the work that we know is best for students, and we want to make sure that our enrollment matches our population. And I'm sure that they are agree with that, right? But you're going to want to work to demystify the process and start by working together with families. Alumni, again, can help, again, getting that buy-in from families. And and junior achievement, I know works across the state. We work with junior achievement Chicago, but I know junior achievement does work across the state. We're really intentional about like that exposure opportunity. You want to start that early. So we started an elementary school where they would have career speakers, and I worked with junior achievement, and I asked her to please ensure that all the career panels, all the career fairs, everything that we work with them, the speakers that she had, I wanted her to make sure that they were reflective of our student population. I wanted a diverse group of speakers, and so I'm sure it took her a little bit more time to do her part of the work, but junior achievement does work on like their hours as well, so they have to work a certain amount of hours with different districts. So it's not just for elementary school. Like I know we all have this idea of junior achievement when we were in elementary school, but they can work with middle school and they can work with high school as well. For junior achievement for us, they did like the school heroes, they did a college career fair, they would do career panels. Career panels ended up being really big because it ended up being where like some of the community partners would bring in some of their friends who were successful graduates. And so it just became a bigger thing. But certainly junior achievement helped in building that structure for us. So again, resources that you might not think of right away, but can certainly help when you're building your comprehensive school counseling program. And so before I close out, it is College Go Week. So just kind of letting everybody know that there are free applications to colleges this week. I want to make sure that we post that information. We would always do like little posters and like say, okay, I went to this, or why apply day and things like that. Just make sure that we're being intentional, letting our administrators understand that it's College Go Week, and just even being a part of the morning announcements and things like that, just to make it a fun week for our students. And then as we're looking at College Go Week, please ensure that you're also, because again, students can see it, students can be it. You want to make sure that HBCUs are included in that conversation. That free list of HBCU posters it's a free resource on Teachers Pay Teachers. It's free right now. So just HBCU fact sheet, and then just like free posters for HBCUs. It was really great to have them across the wall because a lot of our students didn't even know what HBCUs were before, and now they do, which I'm grateful for. In Hispanic serving institutions, there are, I believe, 3 Hispanic serving institutions right now, but I know like Purdue South Bend is trying to become a Hispanic serving institution. So schools that are Hispanic serving institutions, I think 25% of their population is Hispanic. They might have, if you speak to that department, they might have resources. I know Purdue Northwest, then that, and you've heard me speak of Purdue Northwest throughout this whole presentation. They were very intentional with the work that they were doing with Hammond because our district was 50% Latina. So a lot of those institutions, especially when they're emerging, they might want to get those extra couple of students to like kind of go over and get that designation, which gives them a lot of funding. So they are going to be more than willing to assist you, especially, like I said, the ones who just made it or the ones who are emerging. These are, again, students who you might gain funding from. Not funding, but just being able to take students and do a lot of work with them because they have the funding to support it. And then I'm done. But again, just self-reflection, demonstrate cultural humility, and cultivate cultural competence. So again, I'm always learning, I'm always growing, I'm always doing this work, trying to figure things out and learn from other people. So I would just advise the people who are on the call, whoever's going to end up listening, just again, just be mindful of that. Just always, this is like a growing process. You want to do what's best for students, and we can't be stagnant in that. So it's always important for us to kind of take a look back and revisit what we're doing. And those are some resources. And you can contact me. I think that's it, right? Oh, and I did want to acknowledge a lot of the work that I've been able to do, a lot of the data that was on here was from the ASCO presentations that I've done before for the ASCO National Conference. And a lot of that work I did in contact with Dr. Maureen Ponce, Dr. Marisa Cha, and Roberto Aguilar, who's on the ASCO National Board. Just being able to work with them. Dr. Ponce said we're sueños realizados, which means like dreams kind of fulfilled, just being able to kind of do this work at the national level. So just grateful for that opportunity, grateful for them, just to help guide me in the work that I'm doing. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lydia, for sharing with us today. A lot of great resources, a lot of different ways to connect, especially with different local community organizations and universities. So really appreciate your time. I'm just going to close out the session, and I also appreciate you mentioning that this is College Go Week. I failed to mention that at the beginning of the presentation, which is partially why we had you do it this week. So happy College Go Week. Here is it's a link to a very short session evaluation where you can also request to receive 1 hour or 1 PGP point. So this is linked. If you're in the slide deck, you can just click on that link or use the QR code to take you to that short evaluation. Make sure you check your spam email if you don't receive that PGP in your regular email folder, because it may go there. So I just want to let you know that. And then wanted to highlight some upcoming events. This Friday, we are hosting in person in Indianapolis an Engage and Renew workshop. The morning will consist of having a speaker who will share with us different ways to engage students and families. And then in the afternoon, we're going to have different experiential wellness opportunities for our participants. We'll be able to experience a sound bath or immersive sound experience, restorative art, and then we will have a speaker on positive nutrition. So good for not only those in attendance, but also different things that you could share with your staff. I know locally we have some people who utilize some of these speakers with their staff on an ongoing basis. And then they can also utilize the resources to use with their students, of course, too. So really excited about that. Check it out if you're at all curious and interested in possibly attending. Lots of virtual events also happening this month and next. Tomorrow, we have Dr. Russell Sabella. He's going to be talking about AI in school counseling, and then some other different virtual events we have coming up to close out this month and into October. We just launched in the last week or two the registration for the new counselor cadre. This is for those participating, or I'm sorry, those practicing as a first or second year school counselor. This includes not only a monthly professional learning opportunity, but then it also will involve connecting the new counselor with a school counselor mentor. So if you are a new school counselor or have one in your building or district, please let them know about this. And then on the other kind of end of the spectrum, we are launching a cadre for those in counselor leadership positions at the district or building levels. And both of these cadres start next Monday. So take a look, and if you're interested, go ahead and register for those. Finally, some resources, everything we have on-demand videos, podcasts, blogs, DIY guides, you can all find in one place in our digital content library. The Indiana School Counseling Curriculum Library was just created this past school year and was shared in August. This includes a minimum of 3 counseling lessons per grade level, K through 12. Additionally, and it's free. Additionally, it has lessons to meet the state student curriculum requirements for bullying prevention, child abuse prevention, and the graduation plan. So it's a great starting place. You can use the full lesson. You can tweak it, use what you wish, customize it, but it's a great resource, hopefully for all of you. And then finally, the calendar is linked there. That's where I try and drop any information, any dates, any PD happening in the state for school counselors. I add it to that calendar. So check it often because there's constantly being new things added there. Finally, from our partners, ISCA, Inspire Success, CHE, DOE, their survey is live now through Friday. So please take a few minutes to complete that for them before the end of this week. contact us. If you have questions, anything you want to share, please reach out. Again, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Lydia, for sharing. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and a great College Go week. Thanks, everyone.